Right. I want to make one point first. That is the last global uh, panic over the economy, which was last year sometime. I flicked through all the different left sites, and nearly all the ones I went to had Michael Roberts, the economist, explaining the events. And the reason for that is quite strange, and it is that very many left groups don't have any economic theory. The left have fallen back very, very badly. And, you know, they tend to present moral arguments about this or that social event, uh, but not any explanation of the structural nature of capitalism. Uh, so I think it's important to go back to that. And I'm going to start by saying that in the transition from feudalism to capitalism, there were two distinct interrelated processes. One was the creation of the nation state with a distinct national territory, a parliament, body of laws. The other was the primitive accumulation of capital. Uh, and the other thing is what's called primitive accumulation, which in feudal times could be capital already established. It could be super exploitation of the new working class, or it could be robbery of colonies. Now, in a later phase, after the during the colonial period, what developed were national liberation struggles. Uh, and the national liberation struggles had the same problem. They needed to establish a nation state, and they needed primitive accumulation of capital. Yeah, it's an interesting fact, by the way, that the early Sinn Féin, uh, Arthur Griffith's been aware of this problem, said that Ireland had to have its own African colonies. It was ready to build itself as a nation. Um, so uh, if they do that, and the most obvious ways for national liberation is by expropriation. If you take the stuff of the colonizers, well, if you don't take that stuff, then you're in a very, very weak economic position. Uh, and if you fail in that task, rather than develop an independent capitalist economy, you will develop as a comprador bourgeoisie. Okay, which is essentially an agent for foreign capital. Uh, now, so the question is, uh, did Ireland develop as an independent capitalist state? And Ireland hides behind a myth, the myth of 1916, 1918, the rebellion, the War of Independence. But what it obscures is that those wars ended with civil war and a counter-revolution. And that counter-revolution was accompanied by the partition of the island. So at the end of 1923, Ireland didn't have control of its national territory and it didn't have an independent economy. In fact, the economy was more or less the same, which is producing low-grade material, like, for example, calves to be fattened in England, uh, and very little surplus getting back to Ireland. Uh, so the question then becomes after that, uh, did later on Ireland correct for this failure? So you ask yourself, Fianna Fáil came to power in 32. Did the Fianna Fáil government uh, establish independence? Well, it fought an economic war with a limited economic war with Britain. It did establish semi-state companies to try and build up its industry, but by and large, it made very modest progress. And The next thing that's maybe worth mentioning is World War II, when uh, the Irish state was neutral. Was that a declaration of independence? And I would say it wasn't, because uh, the British would have liked to have all of Ireland, but they had the North, and they had very substantial uh, military forces there. And the South was only a little bit neutral. So, for example, British pilots crashed in the South were returned to the North, but uh, German pilots were interned. So they didn't get too far out of step with the Allies. And of course, a lot of uh, Irish nationals joined the British Army and fought with the British. Uh, so uh, by the 1960s, the Irish state had essentially given up the attempt to build an independent capitalist economy. And it produced the Whitaker report that said what Ireland had to do was remove tariff walls and throw the economy open and struggle might and main to draw in foreign capital. So the first chance to do that, which is now more or less forgotten, was with the discovery of oil reserves. And uh, the uh, the Labour minister in charge of energy struck a deal with the oil companies and demanded a 50% tariff. And he was widely applauded as, really cracking the whip over these people. But what's not recorded is that the Danes had come over to advise the Irish and had pleaded with them to set up a mirror structure to take some control of the industry, not to settle for a fee. And in fact, the 50% fee kept falling until it's down to about zero now. And it was also mixed up with things like uh, the Irish give the initial um, licenses for £500. They rented Woody Island, which was actually they then had to pay for a massive environmental disaster when it caught fire, but they were renting that at £100 a year. And then, of course, one of the big scandals uh, of recent years was the Shell to Sea concern, when Shell decided to build uh, a super high pressure gas pipeline just under the surface. A pipeline usually used just on the seabed, but it was put onto the Irish coast. And when the locals protested, there was a very, very savage state repression. Uh, and a lot of people arrested and put away to make sure that Shell got its way. So there was no sign of independence in that. Next chance for declaring independence was joining the EU. And actually, Ireland did quite well out of the EU. Uh, but of course, there were hidden costs. So the open costs were subsidies for agriculture and for transport. The hidden cost was that the Irish economy became locked in a certain position within the European Union, and there were more and more restrictions on state financial freedoms. Uh, then you had the Celtic Tiger of the 1995, and what that was the membership of the EU aligned itself with a massive US intervention, where the US decided that Ireland was the perfect aircraft carrier to penetrate the European market. And in certain categories, the manufacture boomed. Now, of course, the thing is that um, what was also happening was the creation of a dual economy. So one economy was basically US companies, and the other economy was the native economy, which didn't change very much. Uh, and the influx of capital led the Irish bourgeoisie to throw open the property market. And today we're suffering from a shortage of housing. In the 90s, we were building 10 times more houses than the English were, although the English had 10 times the population. At one stage, realtors in Donegal were offering buy one, get one free. Buy a house in Donegal and we'll give you another house in Croatia. Uh, and of course, when the crunch came, the Irish economy collapsed completely. Uh, and the Irish government, first of all, gave an open-ended guarantee to bondholders. It said, "We look after you. Don't be worrying. If you were investing in the Irish market, we look after you." And then they set up a special agency to buy up property uh, at prices the bondholders couldn't hope to get anywhere else. And the end result of all of that was sovereign debt. The Irish economy collapsed, and the Troika moved in, and the EU demanded that Ireland, with I think it was about 4% of the European population, it was to pay 46% of the banking debt. And the Irish government also officially nationalised the Irish banks in order for them to keep functioning. Of course, this had to be paid for. It was paid for by the Irish working class. Ireland lost control of the economy, and the Troika, the European Bank, the ECB, and I forget the third one, the World Bank, they moved in and they wrote the Irish economy, the Irish budget, and they wrote a budget with 4 billion removed right away. This 4 billion was cuts in services, and a big cut in pensions, and a big reduction in public sector pay, and mass privatization. So the period from then is essentially one where Ireland has bounced back. So you sort of say, well, how did it bounce back? This massive debt. Uh, uh, how does it suddenly recover? And the answer essentially is that the credit crunch had absolutely no effect on the transnational investment. They were not affected. They were not taxed. They were not charged. Their services kept going. And because they still had an environment where they could invest quite easily, that investment continued, and there's appearance of a massive recovery in Ireland. But the thing is, that also produced a thing called leprechaun economics. At one stage in this so-called recovery, in one quarter, the Irish economy was claimed to have grown by 24%. Now, that's obviously impossible, but it was essentially what happened is that so anxious were the Irish to get capital that they started they switched over to being a tax haven, basically. So US companies just started parking their money in Ireland to avoid tax, and that led to these massive surges in capital. Of course, there's the Apple story, where Apple and the Irish government together conspired to hide Apple's European profits in a non-existent company. And when Europe caught them on, uh, the Irish government refused to collect this tax on the grounds that it would put off other transnationals. Uh, and they eventually were forced to take the money. They got 14 billion that they didn't want. So the economy today in Ireland, there's two economies. There's the transnational economy and the local economy. The transnational company has a low rate of corporation tax. It was to go up from 12%, 12.5% to 15%. But Ireland actually got a fair number of exemptions within that. So it's effectively still 12.5% for a lot of these companies. But because it's that low and because of the growing uncertainty in the global market, the mass of capital flowing into Ireland is absolutely immense. Now, if I give you, I'll finish off that bit fairly quickly. The Irish government has eye-watering amounts of cash flowing in, but three things. One, the majority of this corporation tax is coming from 4 US companies, which means Ireland's owned by 4 US companies. Number two, the employers' organisations say that Ireland needs 10 billion in corporation tax simply to break even. If it didn't have corporation tax, the country would be bankrupt again. And number three, there are conditions, and the main condition really is that you can't use this money for direct public investment by the state. And that means that nearly everything's privatized. There's never really been a welfare state in the South, and the opportunities that have moved further away. And the big crisis now is that there's a massive housing crisis. There's a shortage of housing. Mortgages have increased well beyond the sort of white hot fumes of the Celtic Tiger. Rents have increased very substantially, and the government have just got away with a new tenants' right bill, which resulted in the eviction of 4,000 people in the first period of this year. And the fact is, the government policy will never solve the housing crisis because the policy is to guarantee at least a 4% return on investors. And if it ever fell before 4%, then they wouldn't invest. So they'll never themselves come to a point where they resolve the housing crisis. And I just mentioned retail investment units, REITs. These came into the Irish market through a Canadian conglomeration. Irish capital wasn't involved, but they changed the law so that we could have Irish REITs. So the Irish capitalists are now involved with transnational capital in a feeding frenzy on the Irish property market. I'll just say two more things really and get out of it. Number one, in the 2026 budget, which was produced last year, the Irish government announced that they were going to use these billions that they'd recovered, but they were going to use them to streamline the economy, to sweep aside any blocks on transnational investment, to step up transport, to step up energy, to step up water, to step up construction to make sure there was more investment. In other words, they see the threat of economic collapse coming out of the US. Most other capitalist countries hedge their bets. Most other capitalist countries take steps to try and get out of it. But what the Irish have decided to do is to go full speed ahead in the hope that they can keep ahead of the growing storm. Uh, One other thing is that uh, um, I should mention is that a key element of these agreements is what's called social partnership. The unions do deals with the government. They've been doing them for nearly 3 decades now. All these deals involve no strike. They're all based on the public sector, uh, and the unions make very, very modest demands of the government, uh, and the government agrees what it can afford, and then it has absolute industrial peace. Not only industrial peace, but the unions step aside from battles against racism and things like that. Uh, they're starting discussions now, and a sign of how bizarre Ireland is. Uh, the unions are apparently demanding uh, a tax cut for higher earning workers. And they've done that before, but it doesn't make any sense if you're trying to build a public sector, if you're trying to build a social services or social rights. Uh, so uh, they're in a very sticky wicket. And the last thing, of course, I have to mention about that is that along with economic dependency comes political dependency. Uh, so Ireland, despite wiping salt tears, is the main source of uh, Israeli investment into Europe. It's the guarantee of Israeli war bonds. Uh, and it has taken, it has moved at speed, at immense speed, to develop its military and to develop its military as part of a NATO uh, war force to attack Russia. And it's going further than that. It's a member of a coalition of the willing. That is, it's not bound by any treaties in Europe or anywhere else, but it wants to be in with Germany, France, and the UK in bumping up threats against Russia. Uh, so uh, I think all that uh, amounts to a picture of a comprador bourgeoisie, and a very unstable one at that. It's a fortnight ago that uh, there was a 16% fluctuation in tax receipts. That was caused by US pharmaceuticals who had stocked up and exported their product to the US in the expectation that tariffs would push prices up. So now they're oversupplied in the US, and they've compensated by cutting down production in Ireland. This brings a big giant ripple in the Irish economy, and it actually also pushes the European economy into negative territory, much to the annoyance of the Europeans. Uh, Before I finish, I can say there's one last thing I can say, which is uh, uh, when partition took place, the North was the center of industrialization. Uh, and as the industrialization was based around the British Empire, around shipbuilding, engineering, and this sort of thing. As the British Empire declined, this industrial base declined, and it's not there anymore in any sense. There's still an arms trade. There's Dallas have a missile factory, and there's a couple of other factories like that. But the main sector of the economy is agribusiness, which is absolutely unrestrained in its pollution of Loch Ness, for example. Uh, and it has a very large public sector. And when the storming politicians hold out the hand to Britain and ask for more funds, and actually that's the economic basis of the North, it gets 300 billion a year from the UK Treasury. And when they ask for more, uh, the UK government say, well, you've got far too big a public sector. You'll be able to live within your means while you cut that down to English levels. Uh, and as the North's a very deprived area, uh, any cutback would lead to absolutely immense suffering. And of course, uh, given that there wasn't really a government was never formed. You had an administration that shared out sectarian power. Uh, the unionists don't like it. Their position has weakened because of Brexit and various administrative changes by the Brits. And that is the explanation for the pogrom, the third such pogrom uh, in in the north. And the only thing I want to say about that at the moment is that most of the left who deny that Ireland is a comprador state say that racism in the north is distributed uh, more or less equally between nationalists and unionists. That's insane. Because we can all see the rats, we can all see the loyalist paramilitaries directing the rats, so uh, we can say the loyalist paramilitaries and the DUP uh, cheering Israeli genocide on the streets. So why is this happening? It's happening because Sinn Féin, after 25 years, have loyalist paramilitaries still carrying out pogroms. And if they admit that, their supporters are going to say, what exactly did we get out of the settlement other than you sitting with your arses in a fake parliament? And so the North's unstable. The South seems much more stable, but it's riding very choppy waters and it's racing towards war. Uh, and the big killer is there isn't really an opposition. The major force that could oppose is the trade unions, and they will not do that. Uh, and the left are closely aligned with the trade unions and very involved in reformism and parliamentary politics. Uh, so this is one of the reasons we held this meeting, because the bedrock of any Marxist analysis is economic reality. On every political superstructure, there is a material substructure. And in Ireland, that's two substructures, a colonial regime in the north and a comprador regime in the south.